What's up guys, Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind, and today I am giving a brief overview of the X-Men franchise. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I started reviewing the X-Men films in January and it's now June. You know, it took me over 5 months to actually review the X-Men films and I had forgotten how good the majority of them were. I think that's because I hadn't seen a lot of the X-Men films in like 3 years. Because I got swept up in Marvel's Phase 3 with Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame and all other comic book films which existed I just kind of put aside because I was focusing on Marvel. So now that Phase 3 has come to an end, I've started looking back and getting nostalgic over some of the earlier comic book films. And the X-Men films were a big part of that. Now, we all know that 20th Century Fox were bought by Disney, so the X-Men films now come under the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they're going to do a new future for the X-Men films. However, I think with that being said, it's important to look back and see what Fox actually did with the X-Men franchise, because they went on quite a journey, let's face it. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what they did with the franchise and whether the majority of the films actually hold up to this day. Now, I review films out of 50, and as you can see from this colourful little graph, the majority of the X-Men films are actually pretty decent. I was surprised that 5 of the films got above 45 out of 50. That just took me by surprise, probably because I hadn't seen them in such a long time. And I think what this graph also shows is that the X-Men franchise tends to fluctuate. It goes through a period of being very good and then dips significantly and then rises significantly. It never seems to have a long period of being consistently good or consistently bad. It's more about hit and miss depending on what they're doing. Now, the original X-Men franchise, the original X-Men trilogy, is the one that deals with the ideas of prejudice and discrimination the best, especially X-Men and X2, they deal with that very well. And even The Last Stand, even though I would say that film is the weakest of the original trilogy, that deals with the idea, you know, should we get cured or should we embrace the differences that exist between us? I think it's got a lot of relatability for modern life and can be applied to emphasise that just because someone looks and sounds different, that doesn't mean that they should be discriminated against. So I think that's a really good message there. And of course, speaking of The Last Stand, it highlights that usually with X-Men franchises, after 2 solid films, they then dip at the 3rd film. That doesn't just happen with the original trilogy, that happens with the prequels as well. The First Class and Days of Future Past are very strong, and then by X-Men Apocalypse and The Dark Phoenix, they dip significantly. So that's another pattern and trend you can see, that they dip after the 2nd film and struggle to make a trilogy which is consistently good throughout. Now, I would say the weakest part in the X-Men franchise is X-Men Origins Wolverine. I'm glad that they didn't actually do anything with the X-Men Origins spin-off films, because from what it looks like from X-Men Origins Wolverine, that fell flat on its face. So I'm glad they didn't do anything with that, because I don't think that would have succeeded. However, I'm glad it did fail, because then they put in more time and effort into the next film, First Class. Now, X-Men First Class is probably one of my favourite X-Men films because it's such a breath of fresh air. It's not as realistic as the original trilogy, it's not as down to earth, it more embraces its comic book nature, and that's a good thing. I like the bright, colourful elements of First Class. I think it works very well. And Days of Future Past is such a great film at bringing the old cast and the new cast together in one film, and that works really well as well. I think after Days of Future Past, the franchise slips. Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix just couldn't live up to the hype, and that's strange because Bryan Singer was brought on to do X-Men Apocalypse, and he has probably been the most successful X-Men director. So it's very clear sometimes it's not just the director you have, sometimes it's whether the film holds up. And X-Men Apocalypse really struggled, and then by the time Dark Phoenix came along, I don't think anyone was really invested in it anymore. And I think that's a problem. If your viewers get fatigued and they just can't be interested anymore, they're not invested in the characters, so they won't go and see your film, and then your film will suffer as a result. Now, the Wolverine trilogy, even though it's not an official trilogy, started off really terrible with X-Men Origins, and then got really good with the Wolverine, and then Logan. Now, Logan is outstanding, but I would actually say my favourite one out of those three films is the Wolverine. Now, hear me out. I think the Wolverine is underrated. I think it's got great characters, it's got very memorable action scenes, I like the romance in it, and I like the Japanese style. I think that works very well, and it fits the character of Wolverine. So the Wolverine is my favourite out of the three Wolverine solo films. Shoot me, I just really enjoyed that film. And of course, I think what the X-Men franchise in its later years became more famous for was Deadpool. Now, Ryan Reynolds' portrayal of Deadpool is really strong. I would say he should be winning quite a few awards for his portrayal. And that got into a new style of filmmaking where you have a lot of fourth wall breaking. I mean, I know fourth wall breaking existed before Deadpool, but I think Deadpool has really brought it to the forefront. So now we're seeing other franchises such as Birds of Prey heavily emphasising fourth wall breaking. And Deadpool is a really strong series of films, particularly because Reynolds is so good as the character. I think that's why it succeeds. However, the Deadpool films are kind of loosely connected to the X-Men franchise. They're kind of set in the same universe, technically, but they more poke fun at the franchise more than anything else. And I think that's a good thing. 20th Century Fox are very used to taking the mick out of themselves. If you look at Simpsons or Family Guy and the Deadpool films, 20th Century Fox don't mind having the mickey taken out of them, and I think that's always a good thing when a studio understands that. I couldn't really see Disney having many jokes poked at them, to be honest. So I would say overall, the X-Men films as a franchise have fluctuated. They've gone up, they've gone down, and it's very sad that they ended on a low note. To be honest, I wish that X-Men Apocalypse was the final film, even though it weren't very good. Dark Phoenix was even worse. So I think it should have ended when it still had, you know, something to be proud of, not just making films and pushing them out to make money. Now, that's not to say that I don't have a lot of respect for the X-Men franchise. They've done some really strong films. It'll be interesting to see what Marvel and the MCU do with them, because obviously this is the only X-Men franchise we've really gotten. Hugh Jackman is the only Wolverine we have ever had. So it'll be interesting to see what Marvel will do with these characters and whether it lives up to what a lot of fans are hoping they will be. So thanks for watching, guys. I really do hope that you enjoyed this little X-Men overview. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. I would like to thank Aaron Williamson for suggesting the X-Men film reviews, because he suggested it a couple of years ago and I've finally done it. So thank you, Aaron. It's always good. You always come up with good suggestions for how I can improve. So thank you for coming up for an idea for a series of reviews that I have really enjoyed doing. And if anyone wondered what my favourite X-Men film is, well, it would be a toss-up between X-Men First Class and the Wolverine. It'd be a toss-up between those two. So, what is your favourite X-Men film? Please feel free to comment down below and say what is your favourite X-Men film, because maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. I could be wrong again. And I will see you in another one. See ya!